All right. Alrighty, what's up, everybody? Episode 101, baseball and whatever. I'm Justin. Vinny is on assignment. I talked to him yesterday. He was doing tax stuff for work until 1 a.m. So he is burning the midnight oil. Maybe he'll come on and listen while he's working. I don't know how he does it. I'm tired already, but he also has two kids. I only have one. So, all right. But anyway, enough of that. We do have another guest co-host this week. We have Chris. You may remember him from our episode where we had him on to discuss what it was like working at Guaranteed Rate Field, and for the organization and things like that. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate having the opportunity to fill in some big shoes.
Oh, yeah.
Vinny, best of luck with tax season. My wife used to be a tax accountant, so I totally understand what he's going through, and I don't envy him any bit for it.
No, I know how much I hate doing my own taxes. I can't even imagine having to do like a business's quarterly stuff and all that. And yeah, that's why he makes the big bucks, to which he'd say, I don't make the big bucks. That's probably what he'd say. So so we're going to talk about a couple of variety of things. We got your Cubs talk. We got your White Sox talk. We'll get Chris's thoughts on both teams. Obviously I know he's a pretty big diehard White Sox fan. And then for whatever, we're going to shift gears. Chris picked out the topic, and this is actually a really cool topic. I was telling him before the show, I had the damnedest time trying to think of things. So we're going to tweak what I'm going to have to say, but we are going to discuss like the top 5 kid heartthrob crushes people had on musicians, TV actresses, movie actors, actresses. There was some in the article I found that like characters on TV shows as opposed to like the actor or actress. So we will get into all that. If you were a kid in the 90s, I'm sure some of these, I ran a few by my wife and she's like, oh no, that person was a moron. I didn't have a crush on them. So, I don't know. The immediate one that pops out, and I won't spoil anything really, but the one that pops out for me, not because I had a crush on them, because I didn't, but I just remember like in the 90s, you could not go anywhere with someone not talking about like Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and like the girls in school would just swoon over him. And JTT, I saw a meme the other day. It said Jonathan Taylor Thomas is now older than Tim Allen was when Home Improvement started on TV.
That makes me feel old.
I know. Yeah. It
like, holy crap.
It really bums me out. But we'll get to that in a second. If you're listening for the first time, thank you so much. We usually do Chicago sports. Then we do our pop culture segment at the second half, which is our whatever segment. You can reach us in a variety of ways. Tweet us at baseball and what, email the show, baseballandwhatever@gmail.com. We are on all your podcast apps of choice. You have the YouTube channel, youtube.com/baseball and whatever. And you can also text us or leave us a voicemail at 1-913-808-3278. That number again is 1-913-808-3278. All right. So, I guess we'll start off. I know, Chris, you mentioned a few weeks ago, we did a show. We had Jake Panowski from the Dingers podcast on, and we talked about our favorite random Cubs. And I know you said you had a few you wanted to throw out there and get my thoughts on them. So I'm going to throw it to you here. What do you got for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are just guys that, whether it's for the name, for their career, and just having kind of that one-off stint where it's like, oh yeah, that guy did play for the Cubs. When I went back and listened to it, it was something that I'm like, okay, I always hate admitting this, but the first pro game I ever went to was a Cubs game.
Really? Okay, I did not know that.
It was. And it was actually it was 2 years before you and I started playing Little League together.
Okay.
Our whole Little League team, parents took us to a Cubs game, upper deck at Wrigley, and it was Cubs Marlins. And
wow. Okay.
I remember getting, at that time, the giveaway for the game was these almost mini poster board size trading cards of every single player on the Cubs. No value whatsoever. But
I was going to say, yeah.
You're 8 years old. You're like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing in the world. So when you guys had that topic, I'm like, I immediately start thinking back to, 1996 and, 95, 96, like, who were some guys around that time that, you come home from school, Cubs were playing at 3:00 in the afternoon, so it was real easy to become familiar with those players. Even as a huge Sox fan, I'm like, okay, well, it's baseball. I don't care. I'm going to watch the game. I just know that I root for the Sox more than I'm root for the Cubs.
Right.
So, just a few names I wanted to throw out.
Yeah.
and only one of them is per se more recent.
Okay.
That's my number 5 guy, which is Mike Fontenot.
Oh yeah, I remember Thierry de Fontenot. It was like the French Connection, right? Like,
Yes.
and I remember I was so bummed he got. Was he traded or did he sign with the Giants? But I remember I was like, oh man, I really
Yeah.
liked him. I thought he was a cool. Not, I don't want to call him a utility guy because I don't think that's what he was
He's
really.
just a
But
good, scrappy
yeah,
player.
kind of like a grinder, I guess, if you want
Yes,
to use that term, right? So yeah,
absolutely. And I think what I liked most about just him as a random Cub is really just the play on the name. I mean, it's Fontenot, but I mean, especially as a Sox fan, it's like, oh yeah, what about that Fontenot guy?
yeah, it lends itself perfectly to the the rivalry between the two teams.
Absolutely. My number 4 guy, most people probably don't remember him playing for the
Mhm.
Cubs, Kenny Lofton.
Oh man, you want to talk about a guy? God, that would have been the '03 season. That was the big trade for not Randall Simon. I'm sorry, it was Kenny Lofton. Hold on. Bobby Hill was from the Cubs. He went to Pittsburgh. Aramis
Mm-hmm.
Ramirez came back. Kenny Lofton came back, and
Mm-hmm.
who am I missing? No, it was Randall Simon. Was he the third piece? Okay,
Simon.
that's what I
Yep.
thought. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
I was waiting
man.
to see if you were going to say Aramis Ramirez.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was the most important one in that. I just remember Bobby Hill was like, oh man, he's this up and coming, middle infielder.
Yep.
And then they shipped him off, and I'm like, now you could ask any Cubs fan, or let me rephrase that. You could ask anybody in the bleachers, and no one is
Right.
going to know who the hell Bobby Hill is. I guarantee
Exactly.
you. So, yeah. So, and I will openly admit that. But yeah, I remember Kenny Lofton. It was awesome. I feel like for the longest time, the Cubs always needed a leadoff guy, and he
Right.
is like the quintessential leadoff guy. You couldn't ask for
Right.
more. And even at that time, like, he was a little bit past his prime, but man, was he good for that '03 season.
Absolutely. And that was one of probably only a handful of moves. And maybe this is something that you guys can even do later on, you and Vinny, is because I feel like it's something that the Sox have a strong, bad history of doing, is going after the guys that they've always wanted, but after their prime.
Yeah, like
So
5,
to
6
me,
years later.
exactly.
Right?
So
Yeah.
to me, that that Kenny Lofton deal, yes, he filled that need of being a leadoff hitter, but to me, that was no different than when the Sox went and got Griffey.
Yeah. Oh God, that was as somebody who like still kind of follows the Mariners from afar because of Griffey as a kid. Obviously, yeah. I mean, when we were in Little League, that was the kid,
Yes,
Junior.
exactly.
I remember being like, that's kind of cool to see him play in Chicago. But then once they trotted him out there, I'm like,
It just doesn't
no,
fit.
no, you shouldn't. You should retire. And then when he went back to Seattle, and I think he fell asleep on the bench one game, and like you could see his rep. He had an interview with Linda Cohen where he acted really strange, and like you could just see his like his like aura was like getting smaller and smaller. And I think he's kind of rebounded now. I know he was one of the coaches for Team USA and things like that, so that was good. But yeah, so.
Yeah, no, it was definitely one of those things where I'm like, man, like I said, the Sox have a really bad history of doing that,
Mhm.
and the Cubs, I don't feel have that same bad decision making.
Mhm.
But I do think part of that is because a lack of over loyalty to the people in the front office of the organization.
Yes.
I love Jerry Reinsdorf, but he is loyal beyond default to the most extreme way. And Kenny Williams, I mean, truth be told, the fact that Carl Crawford never ended up on the Sox is amazing, because that was always the guy that Kenny wanted to get for years. And I bet if he could sign him today, he would.
I feel like how many times did we hear his name with trade offers between going from Tampa to Boston to LA? Is that right?
Yes.
Those 3 teams. But I mean, like in between there, like I remember every trade deadline, it was like even the Cubs there'd be Cubs rumors, and it's like, all right, we're not going to get him. Can we move past it? And and I feel like once he kind of left Tampa, the luster kind of wore off a little bit. Like I don't remember his Boston years, and I know his LA years were not very good.
No, I mean, it's by the time he got to LA, he was one of 8 outfielders that
Yeah.
they've had. So it was just kind of okay, it's a lefty throwing today. We're not going to play Crawford.
Yeah.
We'll maybe get him a pinch hit, bat later
Right.
on, let him hit
Right.
for the pitcher. But yeah, I mean, there's just such a horrible history, but kind of sidetracked that
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
little bit.
all
So
good.
let me
All
get
good.
back to my last few guys here.
Sure.
So we can get into, things that are relevant to now. So my third guy is Jeff Blauser.
Oh God. Mr. like 211 batting average for like
No, he
yeah.
for the Cubs, yes. I mean, I think he was probably in like the 220s, but he was always that sustainable, solid defensive player
Yes.
for Atlanta for
Atlanta,
years.
yeah.
And I hated him with an absolute passion. Like you can ask any of my absolute closest friends, they will tell you that the Braves are the only team that I would root harder against than the Cubs.
Really? Well, that's
Yes.
interesting. Any specific reason why or
Growing up, my grandfather was a huge Braves fan, and because they were
okay.
so successful, I just kind of adopted the Expos as my National League team. And
Really?
I think a
Okay.
big part of that was the first team I played on in Little League.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, Expos. And they're always going to be the underdog because they always suck, but they always have, I loved Rondell White and Vlad and, all these guys. And I'm like, okay. And he just kept jamming it down me like, Atlanta, oh, look what they're doing. Oh, look what they're doing. And I always had the respect for, Maddox and Glavine and Smoltz and Klesko and McGriff and those guys. Absolutely. But I couldn't help but hate them regardless of how good they were.
Totally understandable. That's that. Oh God. It's funny because like as a kid, I feel like and you probably felt the same way. Like as a kid, I could rattle off like every single starting lineup for each team in the league. And most of that honestly was watching Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN, but like a lot of it was like playing RBI 94 on my Genesis. And like, I remember like, oh, the Cubs got this guy. Oh yeah. I remember playing against him with Atlanta and oh yeah, he wasn't bad. And then of course the Cubs got him and he was
terrible.
Awful.
Yep.
It was, I want to say him and Mickey Morandini were like around the same time, maybe right around there.
Yes. But both around the same age, playing for the team at the same time. Again, not huge money contracts, but again, kind of another ode to past their prime.
Exactly.
Bringing them on.
That's the Chicago way. I feel like all the teams do that to a certain extent, or at least did not. Some of them not so much now, but I feel like when we were kids, that was just the Blackhawks were notorious for doing that in the 90s when they were starting to fall apart. But I digress.
Absolutely.
So
well, that especially when you don't have a TV contract and you're trying to get any fans in the seats.
Oh God, that I used to get so upset when I would ask my parents, I'm like, are the Hawks on? They're like, no, it's not a road trip. So sorry, kiddo, you can't watch them this week. It still boggles the mind, but that's neither here nor there.
All right. So my second guy, Ozzie Timmons.
Oh,
about 2 or 3 years he played for the team.
Okay. Was he, I want to say shortstop, but I feel like I'm wrong.
Outfield.
Center field, maybe?
Or
just outfield
field,
in general?
Field,
okay.
Yeah, corner outfield. Well, thicker guy. No speed, but he, if he got some solid wood on the ball, it was going. It was
good.
He was just one of those guys that I don't know why. There's something about his name that just it sounds good in the ears. I don't get it. I don't know.
He's got like you expect like half of Ozzie Smith, and for some reason I'm thinking of like I don't know what else I'm thinking of, and then you see him and you're like, oh no, you are not that. You are much different than that. But if you make good connection with the ball, you have a chance of putting it somewhere. So
of course. And the last one that I had, and I will give my one honorable mention before I go to my number one guy. My honorable mention, and it's just because he was a Sox player who was really. He wasn't great, but he was really good and solid for the Sox, but he was terrible for the Cubs. Bobby Howry.
Oh, God. Yes. I think he was 62 on the Cubs. I don't know what he was on the White Sox.
Yeah, and he was the same for the Sox. Yep.
Okay. He was a guy, I feel like, at least with the Cubs, because I remember him being on the White Sox, but I remember on the Cubs, he was a guy that there was a stretch where he was like, wow, like this guy could be a decent setup guy, or like they even might use him as a closer occasionally. And then then he would go on a tear of like the opposite direction for like a week and a half where he couldn't get anyone out. And then after a while, it was like, all right, please do not run this guy out there anymore. And
right.
He had a decent career though as a reliever, I want to say, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, he was decent with the Sox. Again, you crap with the Cubs. He was decent for like a year, I believe, with Oakland.
Okay.
And he ended up in one other spot. I want to say Toronto, but I don't recall for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, just a guy that I'm like, he kind of came out of nowhere with the Sox, where it's like, okay, in-house guy, nothing special, and he's doing his job great, like better than most of the bullpen at that time was doing.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, so he's kind of one of those hot market relievers right now. Cubs pick him up, and
yeah, takes a complete nosedive. Yeah.
Yep.
I hear you. Well, that's a pretty good list.
No, absolutely. And last guy I had strictly for name.
Okay.
Amari Telemaco.
He was a starting pitcher for the Cubs. Yes.
Yep. Around 96.
I remember him and Juan Cruz. For some reason, I always think of those two together. I don't know why, even though Juan Cruz was just in Telemaco. I remember, but Juan Cruz was just such a like lanky, skinny guy that like you'd swear he would break in half. But Telemaco, I just remember, Harry Carey would have still been around, I want to say, at that point, right? And I remember him vaguely having fun with that last name for some reason, because I know he used to do it.
Was definitely a struggle for him to pronounce.
Yeah. I've gone back. That's like my go-to now when I want to take a nap, when I have the time, when my wife's willing to take our daughter for a little while. Like, I will put on an old classic like Cubs game. And I didn't realize at the time, like when I was watching the Cubs games, it was like 97, 98 after Harry had one of his second stroke, third stroke. I don't remember how many, whatever it was, but near the end. And then you'd go back and I'd listen to a game from like 92, 93, and it's night and day. And you can kind of just see how it's kind of taken its toll on him. But you're right. Those middle 90s seasons, some of those guys' names, and thankfully, like he played into it, like he enjoyed it, and I think Ron Santo did a little bit of that too on the radio when he was still around. But man, that's a name I have not heard in a long time. I couldn't even tell you where that guy went after the Cubs. He could have disappeared into thin air for all I know. But
he actually went to Philadelphia for years. Believe it or not.
Really?
So,
okay.
Yeah. So his rookie year was 96. He played for the Cubs for 2 seasons, and he ended up playing all the way through 2005.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Holy cow.
Yes. Totally random. But he actually, let me correct myself. He was in Arizona for part of 98 and then and part of 99, and then he was Philadelphia the rest of the way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. I guess he caught on. I would have never thought that as a Cubs fan in the 90s. I would have been like, oh, this is just some guy. He's somebody to throw in the rotation, and that's about it.
Pretty much. Through his career, I mean, the only team that was actually successful that he was on was Arizona.
Yeah. Yeah, he was only there for a little bit, right?
Right, like, and he was there for half a season.
So I'm starting to think maybe he wasn't the reason they were successful. I'm call it a hunch.
No, definitely not.
Awesome. Well, man, talk about a blast down memory lane. Well, thank you for putting that together. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, let's say we get to some baseball talk. Let me play the drop here. Here we go.
Baseball.
Welcome back to Major League Baseball. Sort of.
Taking a look at Chicago's 2 favorite teams and other happenings around the MLB.
All right, Chris, since you are the guest co-host this week, I'm going to say let's start with the Southside Hitmen themselves, the good guys wear black. Where do you want to start with the White Sox? I know there's a variety of things. If I'm not mistaken, I feel like Luis Roberts back. But did Eloy get hurt again recently?
Excuse me. Yeah, he went down, but he is on pace to be back hopefully beginning of next week.
Okay.
He had his first rehab assignment at AA yesterday, went 0 for 3, I believe. So still, got to work out some kinks, and I don't think that they're trying to rush him, but at the same time, I mean, he is coming off having an emergency appendectomy.
Oh yeah, it's nothing to mess around with. Yeah.
No, I mean, I've had it myself, and it's certainly, walking around to do work is one thing. It's another to run around a baseball field and
playing a
chase down a baseball.
Yes, and the last thing you want to do is, I mean, granted, I know he was DHing for a lot of the season, but like the last thing you want to do is put him into an outfield and having him shag fly balls when he's already, at least from a casual observer of the White Sox, maybe not the best outfielder on the team, or maybe not one of the top 3 outfielders on the team, I guess would be maybe the better way to put it. But
He's not one of the top 9 outfielders on the team, and that's with complete respect to Eloy.
Yeah.
But he's not on the team for his defensive prowess. It is definitely for the bat. And but even that, I mean, again, appendectomy, it's all torque in the hips and the stomach at that point. I mean, so that's definitely, if he can get through that pain, I mean, kudos to that guy.
Right.
But yeah, there's no part of me that wants to see him in the outfield for any reason.
No.
If it means sparing us, putting an Adam Eaton type player out there who's gonna, who can't hit at all, then I guess put him in left field if you have to. But I gotta imagine that we're looking at some better options than really putting him in the field and just let the guy DH. I don't want to have 2 catchers in the lineup every day with Yasmani, DHing and having Sebi Zavala behind the plate. I mean, it's so much hope for this team the past couple of years, and underperformance is about the only way to describe it. There has been obviously a plague of injuries that continues to happen. I mean, no joke, spring training hit this year, and it's like, all right, if we stay healthy, we're good. First week of spring training, like 3 guys go down.
Yeah.
All right. So here we are back to 2022 all over again. And it's pretty much kind of carried out that way, unfortunately. I mean, you're looking at a team that, they're 7, even with tonight's loss, they're 7-3 in their last 10 games. So you're going the right direction, but they're still 10 games under 500. The only positive of that is that they're in the crappiest division in baseball right now. I mean, when you're 10 games under 500 and you're 6 games out of the division lead, I don't know how else to describe that other than a really bad division.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm looking at the standings right now, and the Twins are in first, and they're literally 2 games over 500. That's it. You know what I mean? And I still, the Tigers are in second. They're 2 games back, but I gotta think like that's not real, right? Like they're not ready to compete. I mean, I know they got Javi, and I couldn't tell you who else they have on that team because it's a bunch of nobodies. But Miguel Cabrera is still collecting a paycheck out there. But I'm curious, like from like as a Cubs fan, like watching them and kind of appreciating what Rick Hahn or Kenny or whoever started to build up, that open that window so that they could compete. And like last year being like, wow, I remember on our prediction show we had last year, I think Vinny, me, and Greg at the time, I think we all picked like the White Sox to win the division. And then like, and I know those 2 had them in the World Series, and I don't think I was that on board, but like it was just a done deal. Like they are so competitive. They are the Zip's projections in Pacoda, sorry, looked so good. And then last season was just I felt so bad. Like that team broke Greg, and now I text with him about the White Sox, and he's like, I can't watch them right now. Like, even though they've kind of started to rebound a little bit, he's like, that organization has broken me. He's like, I play MLB The Show now for baseball, and that's where I get my baseball fix. He's like, but I can't do it anymore for the time being. And like for him to be like, he is probably the biggest diehard Sox fan I know. Like, I mean, I'm curious, like, have you felt like you need to not distance yourself from the team, because that's not what I'm going for, but like, have you ever gotten to the point where you're like, I don't even know what to say anymore about this team? Like, this is not where they should be. I mean, I know last year you had like Tony La Russa and all that stuff, and then this year you had all the stuff with Clevenger to start the season, and I know Rick Hahn was kind of, I wouldn't say not going after, he was kind of defending some of his moves and stuff to the media, and that kind of got a little testy, but as a fan, like what is your mindset? Are you still in the idea that the window is still open, or are you just more like, hey, let's just get to the playoffs and hope something goes our way once we get there?
Justin, it's been 2 to 3 years of just kind of a bad dream.
Yeah.
Is really kind of, I think, the best way for me to put it, because like you said, it's not, this year has probably been the only season of the past 3 where I've been like, okay, we're going to have to work to win the division. We can be competitive for the division, but we're going to have to work. Where last year and the year before, I was kind of like you guys. It was like, it's the Sox division.
It's a done deal. Yeah.
Right. This is a guarantee. Let's just figure out, where we're going to be at in the playoffs and who's going to be the competition.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, you have new manager, a rookie manager coming in, like you said, Clevenger. Hahn, I understand him defending his moves 100%. Sure. I mean, as he should. I do feel like the window is closing quite quickly, though. Yeah. And that's mostly because of the fact that the players that are there and were already there to start this process are now coming up on those contract years within the next year or two. As far as like the bigger guys, the Giolitos and, Tim Anderson, he's still got another couple years, but he's also been vocal about, I don't know if I want to be here.
Right.
And he's the clubhouse leader at the end of the day. He might not be the oldest guy in the clubhouse, but he is the mouthpiece for the clubhouse. Yes. And when he's saying, I don't know that this is where I want to be, that is definitely going to, strike some chords, not in a good way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even like, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I feel like it was like Watergate with trying to read lips of like, well, did he say when with the umpire, it was either, did he say, I don't want to be here anymore, or I can't stand this pitch clock, or like, right. It was so silly. I'm like, I mean, I remember in Philly, that was it. God, who was it? Was it Reese Hoskins that said about, I don't want to be here anymore? And then he had to come out and do like his own little mea culpa and be like, no, I didn't mean that. Everyone says things when they're having a bad day. And like, I know me, like playing in a silly, stupid men's league for hockey. Like if there's a game where I skate like shit and I play awful and I don't do a lot, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then the next week I go out there and I'm like, oh, I actually didn't do too bad. Like, oh yeah, I love hockey. Like hockey's great. So like, and that's just me doing it for fun on the side. So I feel like I would love to know like the tell-all book of what's going on behind the scenes, if there is stuff that's going on behind the scenes, or just like the tell-all book between the dynamic between Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams and Jerry Reinsdorf. Like there's got to be so many stories there. I honestly don't know. Like I want to see the Sox succeed. I have a lot of Sox fans, family members that are Sox fans, and it's like, when you go through that rebuild process and you can see like the gears turning and you're literally working your way up the mountain and things are going well and you're accruing draft picks and those draft picks are panning out and you're making trades to get good prospects and they're turning out. And then when you're at the pinnacle of like, all right, this is our year, and like just nothing goes right, whether it's injuries or management issues or dysfunction in the team. Like I feel like for the Cubs, the more I think about it, like they got so lucky that 1 year in 2016 that all their guys hit. Now, I wouldn't say they hit permanently, because then some of them literally disappeared after that 26 season. You never heard from them again because, well, I don't know what Chris Bryant's doing in Colorado right now, but like for it to all work out, and like I think they were like one of the most historic like defensive strong teams or whatever, but like then the next season your defensive statistics are awful. Like it's just so hit or miss. And for White Sox fans to be like, all right, this is what we're doing, and Rick Hahn being out there, selling this idea and everyone buying in and like, all right, it's here. Oh, and it's like, and then you look at the division, like, yeah, we're 6 games out, but it's like, we're in 4th place. We should not be behind, X, Y, and Z. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges too for the real diehard Sox fans is I don't think you can talk to any one of us and have any one of us say that we weren't fully supportive of Rick Hahn going into this role after Kenny got his promotion to his make-believe position that should just not exist. I have zero use for Kenny Williams whatsoever within the organization, but everybody was so supportive of Rick jumping into this role because they're like, hey,
he was the backbone behind Kenny, bringing all these guys in, getting us into the World Series, winning the World Series, and helping, grow what that was, and then build up this farm system. And then, like you said, all of these right things happen. You trade, Adam Eaton for Giolito and all these prospects where you're like, oh my God, we just made out like bandits on some of these moves. I mean, Chris Sale for Kopech and Moncada, and you're like, okay, the only reason that to this point has probably worked in our favor a little bit is because Sale's been hurt so much.
Right.
You could also counter argue that to say Chris Sale won a World Series with them. So I guess, it's a wash. But yeah, to be there and say, hey, okay, we've made the playoffs. We're right where we're supposed to be. And that's as far as it goes. You don't get over that hump. And then you're battling to just get there the next couple of years still. In a division where you shouldn't be having to battle so hard.
No, you should be able to just run away with it.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Cleveland had like a way overproductive year last year. I don't think anybody expected that from them being as young as they were. I mean, you had Jose Ramirez and the team. And even this year, they're basically still the same, but they have a lot of highly touted prospects that are, especially pitching wise, that are really starting to show out. So they're going to be, to me, them and the Sox should still be the two teams in this division. Minnesota, I think, just overpaid for a handful of guys. And I think they're starting to realize that they're just not shaping out. I mean, Byron Buxton is a great player, but he's a DH that can run when he's healthy. Exactly. And when he does get hurt, it's always the legs. Well, so you got a 230 home run guy who, if he's healthy, can steal 25 bags. If not, he's Adam Dunn.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember he had a collision with somebody. This was probably about a month ago, first couple of weeks of the season. And it was like on the Twins Twitter account, and they were showing it like, oh, Byron's okay. And I remember I made some comment, and I usually don't do that because I usually just follow people and read on Twitter. But I was like, oh, is he still walking after that collision? And some Twins fan came at me. Well, you don't know what you're talking about. He's fine. He's healthy. And I'm like, okay, calm down. Like, give it another week, and then we'll see if he's on the IL, and then you come talk to me. But like you said, amazingly talented guy, but just can't stay healthy. And I mean, he got a pretty good contract. So I don't know. I mean, I wish all the best to the White Sox and White Sox fans. I mean, I keep hoping they'll go on a run and kind of at least get closer and start to leapfrog a couple of those teams in between, like Detroit and Cleveland. And I mean, thankfully Kansas City is far behind them still.
They're still Kansas City.
Yeah, which that's a whole nother topic for another day. But
I mean, and I think the two biggest positives that the Sox have going for them right now is, you've got, like we already mentioned, Eloy coming back hopefully in the next 7 days, give or take, and not to be forgotten, Liam Hendricks.
Yes,
after beating cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, that's an amazing feat to beat cancer and say, I'm going to go play Major League Baseball again in a couple months. Like, now granted, I mean, they caught it early. So his battle was probably not as severe as many people that have battled it. But that's not taking anything away from what he still had to go through and just what that rehab and recovery, and to still go out there and say, and look at this guy and be like, wow, he can still throw a 98 mile an hour fastball and he can still throw a 92 mile an hour slider. Oh shit.
Yeah.
Like that is impressive. So I think, having those two guys come back, I think that's going to pump a little bit of life into this team. And the fact that you finally have, at least, and it's brief, but at least in his last two starts, Michael Kopech looking like the guy that they expected him to be. He's got his last two starts. He's got 15 innings pitched, 19 strikeouts, both quality starts, only 3 hits and 1 walk.
That's pretty. I mean, I feel like that's what everyone's been waiting for, right?
Exactly.
Like, I just remember when they had him and they brought him in, it's like this, you wait until you see this guy. And I feel like he's finally starting to put it together. And if that's the case, then like, look out, because he's going to be really, really good. And hopefully things go well for him. I mean, he definitely deserves it. So, All right. Any last words on the White Sox before we move on to the Cubs?
Stop shitting the bed and win some games.
I know that feeling all too well when it comes to baseball. With the Cubs. Yeah, I mean, I feel like at some point they gotta turn it around. And if they don't do it this season, I feel like you're really trying to make it another year next year and run it back. And it's like, oh man, if you didn't, it's just going to get harder and harder as the years go on. Like you said, with contracts and things going on and players getting older and moving guys out, it's not going to get easier, so.
But I do think though, at least going towards the Cubs, I do feel that, that they made some good moves this last offseason. I was truly surprised that Dansby was the guy that they ended up with.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I knew they were getting a shortstop. That there was no question. They were getting one. It was just a matter of who. I just didn't expect it to be him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, he's gonna be productive, but only as productive as where he is in the lineup. If the guys around him are not doing what they're capable of, he's going to look worse than what he actually is.
Exactly.
Which is not really fair to him. And you can truly say it about like any player, but when you're spending that kind of money on a guy, you need to make sure that, he's not going to stick out like a sore thumb in a lineup.
Yeah. You're spot on. Yeah. I mean, like I want to say someone I saw on Twitter, someone had put up the stats. It was both, current stats and then like the advanced stats and analytics for him and Trey Turner. And they were literally like spot on identical. And obviously Dansby's contract's a little bit more palatable in terms of years and price. I was still shocked when he was the only one left. I'm like, all right, here we go. We're going to have to pay like 10, 11 years, like Xander Bogaerts contract style.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know. That's just such a long time. And then when it came out, I was like, 7 years and the money was comparable. I'm like, all right, that's doable. Like that's manageable.
For sure.
Yeah. I for the Cubs, at least for me, like I know, like we were talking before the show started, they got blown out tonight, 10-1 by the Mets, which is a bummer. Hendricks' first game back in 10 months, maybe. I want to say he was put off at the end of July last year. So, last night was a lot of fun because Stroman was just on a roll, and man, he had a couple rough months to start his Cubs tenure, and then I feel like after like the midway point of last season to now, it's just like quality start after quality start, and the guy is just electric, and he was awesome last night to watch. He was just in the zone, and as somebody who well documented does not like Mets fans because I find them very annoying in my endeavors at Wrigley. It was great to see them lose, and I know they were very upset. But yeah, tonight was kind of a beatdown. I don't know what this team is. I mean, they're 4.5 back in the division. Pittsburgh is 2.5 games ahead of them. Just like we were talking about with Detroit, I don't think Pittsburgh's like ready for prime time yet. I don't think it's their time yet. The Cardinals, I know we had Kelsey on from Peace Love and Baseball a couple of weeks ago, and I was joking with her. I'm like, watch what happens. They're gonna pass the Cubs, and I know for a while last week they did because she tweeted it at me and reminded me that's what I said. St. Louis is a game behind them, and I don't care how bad they are. I will still be afraid of that team no matter where they are.
You have to be.
And it pains me because I can't stand them and all they stand for and all the garbage their fans spew. No
offense, Kelsey.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Kelsey. Kelsey, you're awesome. I know sometimes she listens. Kelsey, we need to have you on again. Kelsey is exempt from that. But yeah, like in Milwaukee, I don't know. I feel like Milwaukee's just like the de facto leader right now, just because nobody's really stepped up and claimed it. I mean, they're only 5 games ahead of, not 5 games ahead, but 5 games above 500. And I don't know if they necessarily have the roster to withstand it. The Cubs, though, they had a losing streak there for a while that was rough. The bullpen, though, is the current problem. They sent Keegan Thompson back down to Iowa, who I really liked last year. And he got smoked in his first game back in AAA the other night. So that's kind of concerning. Granted, it's just one outing, so maybe there's not too much to read in it. Hayden Wesneski looked great in spring training, and then the season started, and I couldn't tell you what's going on there.
Yep. He looked like a guy that was going to come in and just fireball, just strike guys.
Oh yeah,
out like
his
crazy.
Slider is insane.
Yeah. I thought I'm like, this guy's going to throw 200 strikeouts up there.
Yeah.
If he really continues this pace, and then excuse me, same thing. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened to this guy?
Yeah, it's funny. I was reading some articles on The Athletic and about him and the Yankees and Cubs trade and like who won that. And there was a bunch of Yankees fans in the comments saying like, Brian Cashman knew what he was doing. Like we didn't want him. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe. I'm not going to say no, yes or no, but like give it some time. But yes, he did not look good to start the season. And again, I don't know. It was like someone flipped a switch. He had this amazing run, and granted it was spring training, but then once the season started, it was like, oh man, stop doing that. Don't do that. So but what I am curious about, because you are the White Sox fan, is poor Nick Madrigal was optioned to AAA. I'm curious, what is your stance on Nick Madrigal as he was a former White Sox?
What does it take to get him back? I want him back.
You want him back?
I want him back because I can't do Elvis Andrus at second base.
Oh God, that's not going well.
Now, don't get me wrong. I was happy when they re-signed him.
Yeah,
because when he came over to the team last year for the last month and a half, he blew up. He went absolutely bonkers.
He went nuts.
Like,
yeah,
and I'm like, okay, maybe it's truly just the ballpark. It's a hitter-friendly ballpark. Why not?
Sure.
Let's give it a shot.
Sure.
And then there's obviously some value when Anderson's down, but he's not a second baseman. And truly, I mean, Madrigal's just that guy that he's your prototypical like 8-9 hitter. He's a slapper that's going to get on base. He's outside of his rookie year is a relatively smart base runner. Yeah, I remember making some really poor decisions there. I think him being optioned down is literally just a more factored in by you've got Horner at second, you got Dansby at short, you got Wisdom at third. Are you going to take the power, or are you going to take the defense and contact, which I know offensively Madrigal has been down this year.
Yeah.
But I do think that, he brings enough value. I just don't know that there's a spot for him in the Cubs infield right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was very surprised when they broke camp in spring training that he was on the roster and Christopher Morel wasn't, because I would take Christopher Morel every day over Nick Madrigal. Nothing against him. I think he's a very serviceable utility guy, I guess. I mean, I know I got them playing. They got him playing at third, and in spring training, seeing him make that throw, I was like, oh, you are putting everything you got into that throw.
It's like throwing a 16-inch softball for him.
I know. I'm like, dude, I know how you feel, because that's why I never played third base. That's why I was at second, because I didn't have the arm for it. So, yeah, and like, so I mean, Christopher Morel he's like insane right now with how well he's playing. I just feel like for them to be successful, they need to get him in the lineup every day. I know he DH'd last night. Patrick Wisdom started off really hot, and he's really regressing. He's having a lot of trouble. So, if you want to give Morel more starts at third, I know that's not technically his natural position. I know he played in Iowa. He was playing center field like nonstop, which when Bellinger comes back, unless he's going to be out for a significant time, like there's your go-to right there.
Right.
Is he the center fielder of the future? But then I know they have other guys, working their way. Pete Crow Armstrong is knocking. What do you do with him then? But yeah, you need Morel to play, whether it's at third, DH, move Nico somewhere for a little bit, give him a night off, or have him play out in the outfield, even if he's not one of the better. He won't be necessarily the best corner outfielder, because that's not where he normally plays, but you need his bat in the lineup. The other thing that's been kind of surprising, and he's kind of started to turn it around a little bit, was Matt Mervis, because the first couple of weeks he was up.
Yeah.
That was rough. And I just remember watching some of the at-bats he had, and it's like, oh, are you just going to be like a 4A guy? Because man, some of them, it was like he had forgotten all his And granted, I'm not one. I couldn't tell you what pitch is coming out of the guy's hand when it's coming at me 95 miles an hour. So I know that's a skill I do not have. But like, it was almost like he had forgotten what made him so well in AAA. And granted, I know AAA is not the majors, but you think, man, like he's finally, I know he had a good game. I think he had 3 RBIs last night against the Mets. So I'm hoping maybe it was just like a little bit of culture shock. Like, holy cow, I'm in the majors and this is not what I'm used to. And I got to adjust. Because I'd love to see him do well. And you need, between him and Mancini, those are going to be your first baseman for the long haul, at least for this season, because they DFA'd Hosmer, which is fine. Right.
That was a bad deal in the first place.
Yeah, I know I saw people saying like, no, you can't DFA him right away because then, future free agents aren't going to want to come here. And I'm like, what? Like, I go, if anything, you just proved your own point wrong, because if I'm a free agent, I'm sitting here and I'm looking like they won't DFA that guy because they feel bad. It's like, well, I don't want to go to that team because they don't care about winning. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Exactly. It's like saying, I'm going to pay this guy to play for my team based on what he did 5 years ago.
Exactly.
I mean,
which
that's
is
really what they did.
And that's what the Padres did when they gave him all that money too.
Absolutely.
Right. Like, as soon as I saw him get signed for the league minimum by the Cubs, I just kept thinking of the scene in Moneyball where they're talking to David Justice and they're like, how much do you make? No, you make this much for me. The other team's paying you to go away and not play for them.
The Yankees are paying you $15 million to play against them.
Me. Yes, exactly. So, I mean, I don't have too much else for the Cubs. I mean, I feel like it's just going to be an up and down season. Unlike the White Sox, where I feel like this is their time. They should be competing. Like, if the Cubs finish fighting for a wild card spot and they don't make it, and maybe this is what makes me a problem as a Cubs fan. Like, if they get close and they're competing at least in September, late August for a wild card spot, I will genuinely be happy because of what we've seen the last couple seasons. I would love to see them make the playoffs. I don't think they're ready to make any waves if they do, but those first few weeks, it was like, holy cow, this is so nice to see. And then they started to fall back to earth a little bit. And now we're kind of just ebbing and flowing. And really, if they could finish near 500 this season, I think I would take that as a win, So we'll see what happens.
I think that's a fair assessment of where the Cubs are going to be. I truly think, I don't think that the expectation for end of season record for the Cubs and Sox is really any different. I think the expectation is that both teams are going to be right around that 500 and that's considered, kind of a win.
Yeah, it's a victory.
But I do think, strictly because of divisions, the Sox expectation is higher because you are in that crappier division that it's known that you can be around 500 and win your division.
Right.
With the Cubs, you're going to be 500 and you're probably going to be third place in your division.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, and especially if the Cardinals are a good team and then you have the Brewers who are sitting right behind them and then the Cubs. And then you have the lowly Pirates and the Reds, which I don't know what the Reds are doing at this point, but
the Reds, I think they're going for the tanking mentality at this point. I mean, and I think that's the craziest part is, when you look at the Sox, they actually have the third worst record in baseball right now.
Wow.
The third worst record, and they still are in their division.
Yeah, that's.
And granted, it's so lopsided in the NL West and in the AL East because almost all of those teams are at 500 or better.
Right.
So it's just, it's so crazy how the league is skewed in that manner.
It's insane. Like you said, bringing up especially the AL East, that is a division I would hate to play in because you can have a good, quote unquote, a good year and finish fourth in the division and be like, we didn't even get close to sniffing a playoff spot. You know what I mean?
I don't want to be a GM of one of those teams.
No.
I mean, truly, even, the Yankees with an unlimited payroll, it doesn't matter because when you have a team like the Rays, who historically has a lower payroll than most teams, and they're still always competing because they know how to grow the prospects and they're very good at drafting.
Right.
It's truly impressive what that team does. I mean, and a team like the Orioles, their prospects are starting to finally come into their own. Do I think that they're a pretender at the end of the day? Yes.
Probably. Yeah.
But they're still a team that may end up being at 500 and finish last in that division.
Yeah, I pulled up the AL East right now. The Blue Jays are in last in their division, and they are a game over 500. They're 10 and a half back, which is just it's mind blowing. So, all right. Well, should we switch gears to the whatever? Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, here we go.
Now it's time for whatever.
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 Whatever. Whatever.
Whatever.
All right, we are ready to go. We're going to do the whatever segment. I'm just writing down the timestamp so I can edit that later. All right, so for this week, Chris picks, we are going to discuss his top 5 TV, movie, musician, famous person, character from childhood crushes or, you know, teen heartthrob, so to speak. And I found a cool, pretty good BuzzFeed article about the exact same topic. Because I'll be honest, I had a hard time. I'm like, there's so many different ways to go. It was like all encompassing. It was like, I couldn't choose. So,
and I think that I mean, to be fair, I had my difficulties as well, because I'm like, okay, when I phrased it to you as kind of what do we do for a topic, and I said childhood, I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna take that as legitimately and specific as I can, I'm thinking any crush that I had on a celebrity or famous individual, basically before I was, you know, considered a teenager.
Sure.
Because as soon as, you know, you hit, you know, 13, 14 years old, it's like, okay, well, now somebody who, you know, was considered either, you know, a heartthrob or, you know, the hot girl on TV maybe was when I was a kid, but I didn't really notice them until I was a teenager, because it's like, yeah, but
yeah, exactly.
They were really more of an adult role, you know, like, to give an example, Jennifer Aniston.
Sure.
I thought she was smoking once I was a teenager, but as a kid, I'm like, she's on a show with a bunch of her friends who are all adults. Like, I don't really care.
Yeah, exactly. Right. All right. So there's kind of the synopsis of where this came from. All right. So Chris, why don't we'll go through your list, and after each one you do, I'll read one from this article, because there's a few on this article I think that are probably going to show up. I know one of the ones my wife wrote in is on this article too, and she's brought this guy up multiple times. I'm like, he seems kind of like a nerd to me, but anyway, maybe that's why she married me. I don't know. All right. So who's number 5 on your list?
All right. So my number 5 is Mariah Carey.
Oh God, I didn't even think about that. That's a good one. Okay, so give us the rationale there.
So I was a sucker for music videos. I mean, I just if I wasn't watching sports, I was pretty much watching music videos.
Yeah.
You know, if the TV was on, and that was just, she was kind of, you know, the girl. I mean, and I guess unbeknownst to me, subconsciously, I was like, okay, I apparently got a thing for, you know, for a curvy girl who can belt a tune.
Right. Can reach whatever note or octave she's known for reaching. Right.
Yeah.
So
it was just impressive, and I think just the way that, you know, and again, the 90s, what was considered, you know, sexy or in the 90s. Now, I mean, two totally different
tame,
worlds. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, oh man, like, she was, you know, just a smoke show in the music video. And you're like, okay, all right, I can keep watching her. I don't care what her music is. I like watching what she's doing in this video.
I remember there was one of the music videos I want to say was she, I can't remember what it wasn't Notorious. Maybe, oh no, it wasn't Notorious B.I.G. Was it when he was still Puff Daddy? They were like spies, maybe. And like, I remember being on like a speedboat, and it had like a sepia tone. Like it wasn't okay. I couldn't tell you what song that
she
was.
Had a white bikini on. Yep.
I remember that music video. And then also the one where they're at the theme park. Is that Heartbreaker?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I know a few of her songs, but I couldn't tell you much. But
that's how much I memorized the music.
There you go. That's an interesting one. All right, we're going to start off from this article. This was number 2. So I'm reading this from BuzzFeed. This was from May 12th of last year. Let's see. What do they call it? TV and movie characters 90s kids had a crush on. This is their number 2, and I'm going to read this one because this was on my wife's top 2 that she wrote in. She said, in the article, they said, Devin Sawa. Do you remember Devin Sawa?
Yes.
Okay, I had no idea who this guy was until my wife brought him up when we first started dating, and I'm like, who is this? Who? And then I looked up, and I'm like, the kid from Casper? I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even remember him. And then she's like, well, he's in Little Giants too. He's Junior from Little Giants. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, okay. If we're gonna start with that. Don't start with Casper. You know what I mean? And then I know there was a movie she loved. It was called Idle Hands, where like he gets I want to say his hand is chopped off and he's like a zombie, but his hand has a mind of its own. Or I remember watching it with her when we first started dating, and I'm like, this is the stupidest movie I've ever seen. She told me, she's like, oh my God, I was obsessed with him. You know, Tiger Beat magazines ripped out and taped on her wall and stuff like that. So, and apparently BuzzFeed agrees because, yes, there's a bunch of people that wrote in saying they were obsessed with Devin.
I say Devin Sawa was one of the ones on my wife's list as well.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And now, so for her, she's like, yeah, from Little Giants,
right?
So she pulled it right from there first, and then also him being in Final Destination.
Oh God, yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah,
I still remember that came out the year I was in middle school. And I did not go because I didn't want to go because I was too afraid to fly. But that came out the year I was in middle school, and our French class was going to France. And I want to say the beginning of that movie is them getting on a plane, isn't it?
Yes.
To go to France? Maybe I don't know where they're going.
Yeah, I don't remember where they're going.
But I remember there was quite a few people that were freaking out when that movie came out in middle school. All right, let's go to your number 4.
So my number 4 is Amy Jo Johnson, aka Pink
Ranger.
Yes.
She is number 1 on this BuzzFeed list I'm looking at. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean and my wife still holds this over my head because I mean she and her brothers watched like all and every rendition of Power Rangers.
Okay.
I literally only watched Power Rangers for maybe a year or two at most.
The original cast is all I know. And I don't know there's space and, prehistoric. I don't know any of that when I see that pop up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, if it's not Amy Jo Johnson, I don't really care who's playing Pink Ranger. Yeah.
That's a poser Pink Ranger. That is not the real Pink Ranger I grew up with. Yeah,
100%.
It still blows my mind, and I'm assuming you probably knew this, but like as a kid, I did not realize that technically all the fighting scenes was from a Japanese show, and then they just filmed. When they didn't have their helmets on, that was a separate filming crew. I'm like, I had no idea. And as a kid now, going back, like, I can't remember what channel or what streaming service it was on for a while. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go back and watch one of these old ones because I want to know.
Yep.
It did not hold up, number 1. And number 2, it was so painstakingly obvious that they were literally 2 shows just mashed together. Yeah.
And I agree. That was something I didn't learn about until
right over my head,
being like a teenager or something. And you're like, oh man, okay, yeah.
The film quality changes very quickly in between these cuts. I don't know what happened.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, since you brought up the Pink Ranger, let's see, who else can we got? Okay, that one I don't want to pick because I have a feeling that's going to be a big one. All right, I'll bring up the other one my wife brought up so I don't forget hers. And that was Saved by the Bell's Zach Morris. She said that was her guy growing up. She's a few years older than me. I don't know where you stand on Saved by the Bell, but like I totally missed. Like I remember watching it occasionally, like when it was on reruns on like TBS on like a Saturday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
But like I couldn't tell you when it was brand new. But like I totally missed the boat. I didn't watch any of that growing up. I don't know about you, but
man, this can tell you a lot about me. So I would on school days intentionally wake up early to watch Saved by the Bell.
Really?
I would get so they would have it on from like either from 6 to 7 or 6:30 to 7:30. I would get up every morning before my parents were up, before my brother was up, and I would go downstairs, turn on Saved by the Bell, grab either Chips Ahoy or Oreos, eat those, so because I knew my parents weren't going to wake up yet, and grab like a can of pop out of the fridge. It's like, okay, I'm gonna start my day off like this.
Yeah,
and it was every single day, for probably a good handful of years. I mean, I watched Saved by the Bell into the college years and stuff like that. When
you were really all in.
Yeah, I was definitely into it. So I can't say that I'm shocked that your wife chose Zach Morris.
Him. Yeah.
Now, why she chose him over Mario Lopez and AC Slater, again, to each his own.
I don't.
Paul Gosser was a bad looking dude, but
right.
I
don't. Well,
Mario.
Compared to those two, I don't know how I managed to stick around for the last 14 years, but it must be my winning personality. That's what it's got to be. But
it's because you aren't Screech, so you're still.
Well, that's true.
Now,
if I ask her which one of the three guys from Saved by the Bell do I most make her think of, she'd probably say Screech, because I know it's not AC Slater, and I don't know. I don't think I can pull. Maybe I'd be Mr. Belding. I don't know, which is weird. And that's a whole nother problem. But I digress. All right. What do you got for your number 3?
So my number 3 is Jessica Biel.
Oh, Seventh Heaven.
Yep. Mary Camden.
Yep. I remember I even watched that show for a little while. Yeah. I remember that was like a big deal. That was a WB joint, wasn't it?
Yes.
Channel 9.
I got caught up watching that for, a period of time. And not consistently, on and off, but it was, you're like, oh, who's that? And then, so she had that, and then, had Summer Catch with
I remember watching that. Yeah.
Yep. And there's a couple scenes in there where I'm like, okay, all right.
And now she's married to Justin Timberlake. How weird is that?
She is. And I mean,
did not see that one coming.
No, definitely not. But I think that, you talk about, other, 90s heartthrobs, and really he kind of falls into more the 2000s,
early 2000s. Yeah.
But that still fits within kind of the range of
the realm,
what this topic is.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I remember Summer Catch. I remember that, actually enjoying that movie. I remember, was it Freddie Prinze Jr. was the main guy in that? Yep. And Matthew Lillard, I think, was in it. And I want to say was Fez in that? Not Fez. Wilder Valderrama?
Wilmer Valderrama was in there.
Why do I remember this? But yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was actually a decent. I mean, like, on the list of baseball movies, not my top 5, but like,
agreed.
One that if it was on and I had nothing to do, I'd watch it.
100% agree with that.
That's a good pick. All right, I'm going to throw this one out there. I think I'm in the minority. I did not watch this show growing up, much like Saved by the Bell. This would have been a TGIF ABC Friday night show, and I don't know why. We just never watched it. But on this BuzzFeed article, she is ranked number 4, and that is I gotta get her name because I don't know her name. Actually, oh god, the article doesn't say her name. All right, well, yes, it does, and that is Topanga from Boy Meets World. I believe her name is Danielle Fisher. Does that sound right?
Danielle Fisher. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I have no recollection of ever watching this show, but on this BuzzFeed article, people are losing their minds about it. And apparently there's an episode where Corey cheats on her.
Yes.
And like, it was like earth-shattering to anybody who saw it. So
yes, and I'm trying to remember the actress that he cheated on with, because I can picture her, because it was an actress who probably a B, C level actress. But she kind of played this like badass that just was kind of like new to school or something, if I recall correct.
Apparently it was Linda Cardellini.
Yes,
she was in, what was she in? She's been in
Freaks and Geeks,
Scooby-Doo, Dead to Me, Green Book, Legally Blonde. Apparently I don't remember her in Legally Blonde, but yes, that is her. I do remember her. Yes.
No, Linda Cardellini is she would not have made this list for me, but okay. She would. I could easily put her in a top 5 in a couple other lists that I could probably think of.
Sure.
As just definitely being, especially playing, Wilma and Scooby-Doo. She made that look very well.
Right. Yeah, Wilma wasn't so bad after that, right?
Right.
All right. Let's see. What are we on? Your number?
My number 2. So my number 2 was Topanga Lawrence.
Topanga. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. And I mean, so I definitely watched Boy Meets World pretty religiously. That was just one of the shows that was always on in our house. Absolutely loved it. I mean, to this day, and it's funny, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law live in Plainfield, and there's a street that we have to turn down leading to their house, and the name of the street is Feeney. So every time we turn down that street, and I get yelled at every time, especially if my daughter is sleeping in the car, I just yell, Feeney! And my wife gets pissed because she's like, you're going to wake Shay up. And I'm like, I don't care. It's Feeney. You can't not do the Feeney call every single time.
Oh, you have to. It's. I think legally you have to do that when you see that.
Absolutely. So love the show. So yeah, Topanga was an easy number 2 for me.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, I agree. I can't fault you for that one. All right, I'm gonna go. Let's see, who else do we got here on this list? There's some ones that I'm like, oh god, I haven't thought of this person in forever. Let's see here. Okay, where do you? Okay, here we go. We'll go with this one. This is another Boy Meets World, and that is Ryder Strong.
Yep, he played Sean.
Again, I didn't watch it. The only thing I know Ryder Strong from is from, God, I saw this when I was in high school. Cabin in the Woods.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that was like one of the first horror movies I ever saw, and I want to say everyone ends up dead in that movie. Spoiler alert. But yeah, again, bunch of people writing in. I think it's funny. Ryder Strong gets all the love for Heartthrob, but apparently Corey did not, because he is not anywhere on this list.
Ben Savage got zero love whatsoever.
He was kind of nerdy, you know what I mean? So,
oh yeah.
But the only other thing I'll say too, and I know we talked about this a little bit before the show started, and he is on this list as well. Before we get to your number 1, that is good old Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who I feel like he kind of fell off the face of the earth, or maybe that's what he wanted. I don't know.
Yeah.
And like I was telling you before the show started, apparently I saw a meme. He is now older than Tim Allen was when Home Improvement started. So I feel ancient at this point.
Right?
Yeah, man, time just keeps moving on. I don't know about you, but like I look and I'm like mid-30s. I'm like, I still feel like I have the mentality of a kid though. Like I look at my daughter and I'm like, how am I responsible for you? Like who said this was okay? I feel like I'm pulling one over on somebody. So
no, 100%. I mean, and like using JTT as a point of reference, I think there's also a little bit of psychological piece that plays into that, because he was genuinely older than the role he was playing.
Yes, he was. That's true. I mean, yeah,
he wasn't 16 when he was playing a 16-year-old. He was well into his 20s when he was playing a 16-year-old.
Yeah, because I want to say he was older than the guy that played the oldest
Brad,
brother.
Yeah,
Brad,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, man. Well, I won't speak for you because I know you're younger than me, but man, I'm old. All right, let's.
A year younger than you.
Let's let's go to your number 1. Who do you got? Who makes the top premier spot for you?
If my number 1 isn't easily guessable from anybody who's been listening for the past 15 minutes, I'd be surprised. But going straight back to Saved by the Bell, it's got to be Kelly Kapowski, Tiffany Amber Thiessen. I mean, and I think I actually liked her even more in the movie Son-in-Law.
Oh yeah, okay, you're right. I do remember that movie. Yeah.
I mean, she was for me the like, okay, if that's what girls are going to look like in high school, I'm really excited to go to high school.
Right, high school is not going to be so bad. It's going to be okay.
Right. And it's funny because there were so many articles, like you said, like you had that BuzzFeed article. I looked at so many articles where, she was the number 1 kind of hands down across the board, but there were so many other people that were commenting like, oh no, Elizabeth Berkley was absolutely like the smoke show as Jessie. And I'm like, I don't know. For me, I never found her attractive in any way. Where like, I don't know, Kelly Kapowski, just anytime Zach would do something wrong to her, I'm like, man, he's a dick. Like, you don't do that to Kelly.
You don't do that to her. You treat her right.
Right.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, like I said, the write-ins I had were from my wife. Were there any other people? I know you had reached out. Anybody else message you, or any other honorable mentions you got?
Yeah, I had. So my honorable mentions, I also had Rachel Lee Cook.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Okay.
I was a big Baywatch fan, so but I'm not going to go with the assumed Pam Anderson, because as attractive as she was, I always found Carmen Electra to be more attractive.
Okay.
And then she married Dennis Rodman, who left her for himself.
Yes, that's true. Man, the 90s were a weird time.
It was so crazy. And then my last honorable mention is actually her. So her name is Debbie Dunning. She played Heidi on Tool Time on Home Improvement.
Yep. Good call. That's a good call.
Everybody loves Heidi. You couldn't not.
No, she was the foil to Tim's stupid ideas. Her and Al. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And as far as write-ins, I had my wife, so JTT, Devin Sawa. She also had Leo DiCaprio. She had Freddie Prinze Jr.
Oh yeah.
Ryder Strong. Justin Timberlake.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one that she had, I'm like, really? Why this guy? And then I'm glad that she didn't say because of Dawson's Creek, because I'm like, at that point, that's where I'm like, I felt lost any chance of good looks. But Joshua Jackson, she's like, because of him as Charlie Conway. She thought Charlie was just the cutest.
Captain Duck.
Yep.
Yeah. That's your wife. She sounds cool. If she can reference the Mighty Ducks, we're good. So.
Oh yeah, she loves the Mighty Ducks. She's all about it.
All right. Well, Chris, you've made it through your first real episode. I know the last one we did was our interview with you. You've made it through an episode of Baseball and Whatever. Again, thank you so much for
appreciate it.
For reaching out and helping out with this one. Again, if you want to reach out to the show, you can find us in a variety of ways. YouTube.com/baseball and whatever, Twitter @baseball and what, email the show baseballandwhatever@gmail.com, Instagram @baseball and whatever. Find us on your podcast app of choice, and you can text in or leave a voicemail at 1-913-808-3278. So I'll be back at some point next week. I know we are working on another interview with one of the guys from CHGO, but maybe this time a Blackhawks perspective. So I'm kind of excited about that. That'll be a little bit of a tease. We'll see how that goes. And that's all I got. Chris, anything else you want to share, plug? Anything you got?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Vinny.
Yeah.
Hope you make it through tax season and don't want to, not come back to this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would love to be and take another, fill-in co-host spot
for sure
if the opportunity presents itself. But at the end of the day, this is Vinny's spot. I don't mind jumping in on a random episode here and there as the Sox guy, as the whatever you want me to be. I'm happy to be it.
Well, again, Chris, thank you a ton. We appreciate it, and we will be back next week with more Baseball and Whatever. Take care, guys.